Hopefully this will work.
All right. So this is not an advanced session on TMUX. It's getting started. I'm going to talk about some advanced things, but in general, this is about an introduction to TMUX and what it is and what it does. We're going to talk about why you would use TMUX, how TMUX is built, how you configure it. There's tons of commands. We're going to go over some of them. TMUX has a collection of things out of which it's built: servers, client sessions, windows, and panes. We're going to talk about that. It has a status line. We're going to configure that. There's some automation. It's got modes, copy and paste, and Jim and I are going to do some pair programming. The most important thing I can teach you tonight is that Man TMUX is the most complete, accurate, and up-to-date reference for TMUX. It is the real manual. It's the place you should go. So who am I? My name is Wolf. I'm a long-time software engineer. I've been using TMUX for probably at least 5 years. I'm not really sure. I'm not an expert. I continue to be a student of TMUX. So it is possible to ask me questions to which I won't know the answer. I'm a strong fan of automation, and that's going to show through on this presentation. It's one of the reasons I use TMUX instead of GNU Screen. And I'm not really an Emacs person. I've got nothing against Emacs, and some of my best friends use Emacs, so I'm not a Vimist or something. But Vim is typically my editor of choice, and so when I have to, I'm going to be using Vim key bindings here. And for those of you on YouTube, yes, Wolf is my entire name. There is one thing I want to warn you about. I'm typing on a crazy new keyboard layout that may slow me down a little bit. I love my keyboard, but I'm still adapting to my new layout. So let's talk a little bit about TMUX and where it comes from and what it is. TMUX is a terminal multiplexer. So that means it's a program that runs in a terminal, but it manages subterminals in itself. Yeah, like Screen does. You use it to allow remote programs to keep running even after you disconnect. Access remote programs from different local computers, even at the same time. Open up the terminal in ways that are like an IDE with lots of subterminals looking at the things you want to look at, and to facilitate pair programming. It's super powerful and good at all these things. It was invented by Nicholas Marriott in 2007. He was a heavy GNU Screen user at the time, but he was dissatisfied. He thought that GNU Screen had too much baggage, poor documentation, strange configuration, and the command line was not the best. So today, TMUX is pretty mature, and it's better than GNU Screen, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. For one, it's truly client-server. GNU Screen just emulates client-server behavior. TMUX, you can get either Emacs or Vim key bindings, whichever is more comfortable for you. It's easier to script TMUX. Splitting windows into panes in TMUX is more advanced and lives through detaching and reattaching a session. TMUX has automatic window renaming. It's got a much richer set of commands and options. It's way better at Unicode, and it's under active development. It's a 6-month release cycle, and there's still progress made. It's on GitHub, and the issues are open. You can look at what's open right now and file your own. It is growing, and things that you want to get changed in it might get changed, except for if you want horizontal and vertical on split window to change.
All right, I'm still not understanding what you mean by multiplexer. I know what a terminal is.
So I'm going to show you in just a second. But what that means is when you've got TMUX running, it makes one big open area inside your terminal, and that big open area is the terminal itself. And you can split that terminal into little terminals. So your one physical terminal window could have 6 or 8 or however many you want subterminals inside it. It could have tabs. It could have splits. That's what it means to multiplex terminal sessions. And I'll explain why you wouldn't just use your GUI in just a second. So can screen do things that TMUX can't? This is a question specifically for Kattni Rembor. GNU Screen can directly make serial connections, which is a weird thing for a terminal multiplexer to do. You might use that to connect to a microcontroller board. However, you could just use a program called CU for this. There's actually several different serial connection tools, and you can even run CU from within TMUX. GNU Screen has a single server per session. If you use multiple sessions and server stability is a problem, then the added isolation that GNU Screen gives you might be helpful. But the bottom line is that TMUX and GNU Screen are very roughly parallel in major features. So why would you use TMUX instead of just your GUI terminal? I mean, your GUI terminal already has multiple windows and probably has tabs and almost certainly has splits, and it definitely has a working mouse. Well, mainly, those four things I talked about earlier: protect running programs on remote servers, allow remote programs to be accessed by different local computers, bring programs and shells together like an IDE, and facilitate pair programming. Plus, you're usually running TMUX remotely over SSH. So unless you're forwarding your X stuff, you're not getting a GUI terminal on the other side. And TMUX has much better scripting support than your GUI terminal. And supposedly, at least this is what they tell me, you're faster when you keep your hands on the keyboard, and that's what TMUX is supposedly best at. And besides, you're not giving up your GUI. You're running TMUX inside it. So how to get TMUX and where it comes from. It's an OpenBSD project. That's its central focus. But the portable version, which is on GitHub, runs on Linux, Unix, macOS, Windows. You can install it with your favorite package manager. I installed it with Homebrew on my Mac. You can build it from source. You can download a binary. If you're running Git Bash for Windows, there's a special procedure to install it, and I've linked to this, and I've got the same link in the reference page. And finally, do you want to use the mouse or not? TMUX is specifically designed to do everything without the mouse. But if you want the mouse, you can still have it. And in my experience, the best use of the mouse is fine-grained pane resizing. Because you split your window into panes, you can just drag the pane borders to change their size. Otherwise, you have to use command keys that move them one line or one column at a time, and that's kind of annoying. So let's get into an actual TMUX demonstration here. I'm going to switch over to a terminal, and I'm going to SSH into a server. And I'm going to create a new session.
Wolf, could you make your screen just a slight bit bigger, if that's possible?
Can I?
Yeah.
Let's find out. I might have to look at the session.
Command.
I mean, this is 24 point. Edit session. Presentation mode.
Yeah,
Text is 28 point. Let's make it 32 point. How's that?
Can you make it slightly bigger? Like 48 would probably be good.
48?
Yeah.
This is gonna mess up my. This is gonna mess up some stuff.
Well, let's make
We'll
it.
See.
Yeah, let's see. But thank you.
Sure. Okay, so TMUX new session. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it session 1. And here I am in a session. I'm going to run top. I'm going to split my window. Vertically. Say ls. So now I've got two different panes here. This is one running top, and this is one just running bash. I'm going to close this outer window. That's like disconnecting from the server. And now I'm going to launch a new window, presentation mode. And now I've got to set the font size again. Is that 48? What size is that?
I think if you do Command plus, it may give you a bigger thing rather than...
I tried Command with the scroll wheel. I'll bet Command plus works. Let's find out.
There we go.
All right. I'm going to SSH back into my server. I'm going to say TMUX list sessions to see what's going on. Oops. I have one session. It's called Sesh 1. I'm going to attach to it T for target Sesh 1. And top, now see my window's gone off the edge of the screen. That's annoying. Let me make it fit again. I still have top running. I still have bash running, and they're exactly the way they were before. That is my first demo. I'm going to close it again. I'm still leaving it open. All right, so a little bit about the commands that we just used and commands in general. The command names are long and descriptive, but they all have shorter forms. I didn't use the shorter forms. I'm using the long forms all the way through here because I want to make sure everybody knows which command exactly I'm using. But they have these short forms, like I did that split window. I could have just said split or split W. Those both would have done the same thing. Or split pane or split P. Those are aliases for the same command. And any unique prefix is enough to get the command to work. And the command can be used from any terminal, outside or inside TMUX. When you're outside TMUX, you're going to need to target an existing session window and or pane. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And even from inside TMUX, if you're working on a different pane than you're on at the moment, you'll want to target it. So we'll talk about that. TMUX has its own internal command prompt that we didn't see. I'll show you that. You can use commands there, and that's a really great place to use them. Good things happen when you do it there. And you can use TMUX commands from within TMUX configuration files. Now, here are the commands that we use. We use new session. -S was the command that was the flag that we used to provide a new name for that session. Otherwise, it just would have had an automatically assigned number starting from 0. If we had used -N, that would have let us name the initial window that we made. And because we didn't say -D, we were immediately put into the session. We were attached to it automatically. If you do it from inside TMUX, from TMUX's command prompt, it's going to switch to a new session. It's not going to automatically nest a session inside. We also used split window. That has some aliases. I disagree with the name split window because it targets panes. It operates on panes. If you give it the -T for target thing, you supply a pane. Now, here's another thing that a lot of people disagree with. which is that -v arranges, it splits the window. This is the default, I think. Splits the window into two panes, one above the other. The reason people think of that as horizontal is because the splitter, the line between the two panes, is horizontal. But the panes themselves are arranged vertically. You can do that with the quote key. It's a special shortcut. I'm going to talk about the prefix and the shortcut keys in just a second. And -h makes the windows be side by side. This is the opposite of Vim. Vim says that vertical splitting is a vertical split bar, and the windows are side by side. And horizontal splitting is the horizontal split bar, and the windows are arranged above and below. The shortcuts are terrible. I hate prefix quote and prefix percent because they look like they mean exactly the opposite thing to me. The quote has two boxes next to each other. That's what a double quote looks like. So I feel like that's going to make two panes next to each other, and it doesn't. It does the exact opposite of that. There's also a great article, which I've linked to here, and I will link to on the references page, that talks all about split window in great detail and how to use it. We also use list sessions. The most common way to say that is ls. So a lot of people start their day by saying tmux ls. When you're inside tmux, there's something better to use called choose session, and we're going to actually play with that. And we used attach session. So that's when we were outside of tmux and we wanted to attach to an already existing session. -t says what session it is you want to attach to. And if you don't give a -t, it's going to attach to the last client, to the last session that's not currently attached to anything. If you use it from tmux's command prompt, it switches to the targeted session. It doesn't try to nest. You can nest tmux sessions if you want to. It's a little confusing, but you can do it. tmux just usually doesn't want you to do it because it thinks it's probably a mistake. And once again, there's an alternative if you're inside tmux called choose session. So let's talk about how tmux is built, the architecture of tmux. Thank you to Jim McQuillan for this terrific diagram that shows the parts. This outer gray box is the server. A server contains one or more sessions. Sessions have numbers. They really have IDs. These aren't drawn as IDs, but they are IDs. I'm going to talk more about IDs in just a bit. Inside a session, there's one or more windows, and inside a window, there's one or more panes. A pane is an actual terminal. Let's talk first about servers. A server owns one or more sessions, and when the last session goes away, the server goes away. And the reverse is also true. If you kill the server, all the sessions in it are killed. And servers communicate with clients, which we're going to talk about in a second, over sockets. A server listens to exactly one socket, and if you use a different socket, you're using a different server. So you can have multiple tmux servers on a machine at the same time, and I'm going to show you that we have done that already. I just didn't show it to you on the zv.sh server that we were just connected to. A client is a terminal app like Xterm or iTerm2, or even a pane inside tmux if you're running nested tmux sessions. A client is connected to just one session. That's all it can show. If the client is killed, the session is detached, but it goes on living. You watch that. When I closed that window in iTerm, that window was a client, and closing it detached the session. When I made a brand new iTerm window and connected to the server again, I was able to reattach to the session, and it was still alive just like I left it. If the session is detached or killed, the client is killed. So some commands target clients with -t. -t almost always means target, except for when it means session group. And clients are named for their underlying device. On my system, /dev/TTYS005, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Names on your system are going to vary. If I were to look at the session we were just in, where'd my window go? Oh, I closed it, it went away. Well, let's worry about that another time then. Sessions are the entry point into TMUX. They're the big deal. You start your TMUX day by finding the right one, either making it from brand new or attaching to an existing one, and seeing what's there by saying list. A session manages one or more windows. It's attached to 0 or more clients. That's right, more than one client can attach to the same session at the same time. So you can see the same stuff happening from 2 different places. A session belongs to exactly one server, and you can't move it from one server to another. It is where it is, and that's all there is to it. If you start a session and no server is running, a server gets created automatically. A window is a thing inside a session. A window contains one or more panes, and they show up in the TMUX status line as tabs. When the last pane in a window is closed, the window closes. And if you kill the window, it kills all the panes that are inside it. A window can be linked into more than one session, and a window can be moved between 2 different sessions. We're actually going to try that. A pane is a thing that goes inside a window. There can be many panes inside one window. It's a single virtual terminal, and it belongs to exactly one window. And inside a pane is where your actual work happens. So let's take a quick look at configuration. Configuration lives in your .tmux.conf file. It's in your home directory. It's only read when the server is created, not when you make a new session or a new window or anything like that. So the first time you make a session and that server gets created, that's when it reads the tmux.conf file. You can actually make it use a different configuration file with a -f flag. Whenever you want to, while your server is running, you can update all the values that it's using to do its job, all its options and variables and whatnot, by sourcing a configuration file with source file. But rereading the source file, rereading such a file, only overwrites the options that you've got now. It doesn't, and adds new one. It doesn't reset anything back to original defaults. By leaving out, what key bindings you should use, that doesn't make key bindings reset to what they were before. It just leaves them as they were set just a second ago. And there's 2 primary commands that are used in the configuration file. And that is set option, which you use to control all the variables and options that are inside TMUX, and bind key, which is what configures your keyboard to do the things that you want. I'm going to talk more about those commands in just a second. But first, let's talk about the prefix key. The prefix key starts almost all TMUX shortcuts. That's why they call it the prefix key. It lets TMUX know that the next key is for TMUX, not for the app in the active pane. And TMUX comes with, Screen has this too. Screen has Control A. For TMUX, it's Control B, and they abbreviate it C-B. You can change it. In the tmux.conf place is the normal place to change it. And a lot of people use Control A instead because that's what GNU Screen uses. And also, Control B is far away, and Control A is really close. Once you've hit the prefix, if you hit it again, you mean to send it past TMUX and into the app in the current pane. It's because of that you can allow Control A or Control B or whatever it is that you're using to get into the app that you're running inside TMUX. You can change it live at TMUX command prompt in case you're running a nested TMUX instance and don't want to get confused, but we're going to try not to run nested commands. All right, TMUX's command prompt, if you hit the prefix key and then the colon, you will get a command line, just like you would in Vim if you hit colon. You can execute any TMUX command from there, and it uses Emacs-like key bindings, unless it discovers the string VI in your $editor, or you explicitly tell it to use something else by setting the status keys option. You can get out of it by executing nothing or hitting escape, or escape if you're in VI mode, escape to get into VI normal mode and then Q. So let's actually take a look at this. I'm going to, I wish I didn't have to keep getting out of Keynote to, all right, let's get this one bigger again. So let's run TMUX. We'll see what sessions we have. None. This is local. TMUX. New session. Minus, we'll give it a name, mug. And we'll name the first window we'll call the first window man. So here we are. The status bar is at the bottom. If I make a new window, you can see there's multiple tabs down there. I can go back to the first tab, and we can say man TMUX, which is the most important resource that I told you about. If I go back to the 2 window, you can see that it's still running bash. And now let's bring up the command prompt. I've got mine programmed to be yellow. So from here, we can do all of the stuff that we did from the shell before. Like we can say split window. And that makes a vertical split, but the splitter itself is horizontal. And we can change the prefix from here. So we can set option -G prefix to control W, for instance. So now I have to say control W shift colon to get the command line. So that was annoying. I'm going to set it back right now. Set option -G for global, the prefix to be control A. And let's go up to the other window and vim our ~/.tmux.conf. So here's what I've done in my tmux.conf. I've set option -G, the prefix, to control A. And then once you've hit control A, I've bound the key control A to send the prefix. So that's what to do if you just typed control A and you type it again, it'll send whatever the current prefix is all the way through to the app that's running inside your active pane. And then, because we don't need it anymore, I unbound control B, the default prefix key for TMUX. Now, a thing that happens is you edit your config file a lot, and you want to source it. So I also bound a key to source that file, and here's the command that I bound it to R, lowercase r, and here's the command that executes. This is all one thing. First, it sources the file home.tmux.conf, and then I escape the semicolon, and then it does a display message. The short version of that is display, that I reloaded it. So for instance, right now, I could Control A and then hit R, and then you can see it's reloaded. All right, Control A, back to the main page. And there's one other neat thing that the command prompt does, and that is it does auto completion. So if I say CHO and hit tab, there's a bunch of things that start with choose. And if I hit tab again, now that it sees that I want one of the ones that starts with choose, it brings up a menu of which ones. And I can just hit the digit to get the thing that I want. So I can choose my session, for instance. And this is choosing the session. And I don't want to choose a session at the moment. We're gonna look at that in more detail a little bit later. So set option, we just used it. The abbreviation is set. There's 5 different places for an option to live. It can be a server-specific option, session-specific, window, or pane. Or you can set it globally, which means it will be inherited by those things. And also pane will inherit things from window, and window will inherit things from session, and session will inherit things from server. For most of the options, TMUX knows where to set it. It knows where it lives. But you can actually set it with -G for global, -S for server, nothing for session, -W for window, and -P for pane. You can use -A to append text to an already set option, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. The opposite of set option is unset option. And you can see existing options, one or all of them, with the show options command. You can see all of the options, and you can control them, turn them on and off, and set them to different values by going into customize mode. Customize mode is the command. The actual mode is called options mode. That's weird, I know. But also, I love options mode. It's so cool. In fact, let's just take a look here. Control A, Shift C. Here's options mode. There's server options, session options. See, I've got my mouse off. If I go down there to mouse off, if I hit Enter, I can turn the mouse on. Et cetera, et cetera. It's a great way to explore, to see what options are available and where they live. There's a bunch of key tables. I'm not going to talk about key tables in this talk because they're kind of advanced. But Q will get me out of that. Let's get back to here. And then we use bind key. The opposite of bind key is unbind key. And you can show all or a specific key binding with list keys. So for instance, we just used capital C. So if I say Control A, list keys, capital C, it shows that that is customize mode -Z, Z for zoom. So it fills up the whole window. All right. So there's a small set of commands that I think if you know this set of commands, you know enough to get around. You know enough to get the job done. So let's talk about those commands. New session, we've already used. List sessions, we've used. Attach session, we've used. List keys, we just demonstrated. Detach client, we didn't use yet. Instead, we closed the window, and that didn't detach. But if you said prefix D, that would detach the current client and put you back into the original GUI terminal window that you were in. You can create a new window in this session by saying prefix C. You can rotate around the windows that you've got by saying prefix N and prefix P. I didn't list prefix P, but they're for next and previous. You can split the panes with those two commands that I showed you earlier. You can move to the next pane with prefix O. We're going to come back and look at the actual command for prefix O in just a bit, because if you see how it says select pane -t : dot plus, we're going to see what dot plus means, and we're going to come back to it. You'll be doing copying and pasting sooner or later, and to enter copy mode and actually get ready to copy something, you say prefix left square bracket. And to paste something that you've already copied, you say prefix right square bracket. And we've already shown you the command prompt. So just this set of, I think this is 13 commands, is enough to get around TMUX, along with man TMUX. Always think of man TMUX first. That's the place to look. All right, let's look deeper into sessions. Every session has a unique, across the server, unchanging session ID, like $0, $1, $2. If you didn't supply a name when you create a session, it automatically gets a number for its name, but don't confuse this with the ID. It's just named session 3 or session 5 or something like that. I think coincidentally that name, which is just a string, is the same number as the ID would be, but I'm not totally sure if sessions get destroyed and stuff, if that's still the case. And several commands take a -t target session. So you can supply a session ID for that, a name, or a pattern to be matched against session names. And that's the order of preference that it will try to figure out what you meant. Here are some session-specific commands. This is not all of them. As always, consult man TMUX. We've already used attach session and list sessions. I did quickly demonstrate choose session, and we used new session. You can imagine what these other things do. I'm not going to go into detail on all of them. The slide deck is going to be available as a PDF after this talk is over. I recommend you download it, and you can go over it slide by slide if that interests you. And remember, man TMUX. A little bit about session in detail. A session can be connected to more than one client at a time, but every client looking at the same session shows the same active window. Now, there is a way to get around this, and I'll show you in the next slide. And that way is session groups. I'm sorry about this wall of text. This slide is going to be more useful to you when you have the slide deck in your hands and you're going over it by slide. But if you want multiple clients, for instance, you and a friend, I'm going to talk about this more in pairing, to work on the same windows and panes, but independently, so that you don't have to look at the same window. You can use session groups. What they are is a collection of sessions, all of which contain the exact same windows and panes. They're linked into multiple sessions, because that can happen. But each one has its own active window, which includes the session ID and session name. How do you get one? When you say new session, you say -t and then a group name. And if you've named an existing group, that's where you'll go. If you name a new group, it starts a new group. If you give the name of an existing session, it'll make a brand new group with that session's name. But here's the key, it's not magic. No matter how many sessions contain a pane, there's only one process in that pane. So even if 3 different people are looking at the same session or different sessions in the same group, and they're looking at the same window in those sessions, and that pane has Vim running in it, you won't have 3 different cursors. Sessions in a group can have different active windows. So if you had 2 Vims running, you could have 2 different cursors, 1 for each Vim. But if you're looking at the same active window, they're going to have the same active pane. Let's give the same treatment to windows. You can target a window with its unchanging window ID. Again, it's server-wide, and that is prefixed with an @ every window has an index within its session. That index can change if you reorder the windows and renumber them. Window indexes start at 0 unless you specifically set the base index option, which I always set to 1, because it makes more sense if the windows are numbered starting from 1, at least to me. And I think that's pretty common. Lots of commands take a -t target window, and you can supply a special token, which I'm going to show you in a second, an index, a window ID, an exact window name, or a pattern to match against the window name. When you target a window, you can start with the session if you need to. Remember how we were looking at that next pane command and how it said -t:\.+? Well, that colon is the thing that comes between a session and a window. If you just say nothing : it's an empty string : that means the current session. Like I showed here with :bash. The current session, the window named bash. $6 is session ID 6 with the window editor. And the very first one of my examples here is my session, is the session name, and @2 is the window ID. If you didn't supply a name for the window, it will be continuously dynamically assigned as commands happen inside the active pane, and it switches between active panes. That's the window's title, by the way. So tokens that identify a window, you can either use these strings and curly braces, or it turns out that for Windows, every token has a special symbol. So you could have said ;:, to mean the very first window in a session, or you could have said, I'm sorry, ::, or you could have said :+ to get the next window after the one that's current right now. I'm not going to go through all those. You can have the slides. And let's talk about some window-specific commands. New window we didn't use, but you saw us, it happens automatically for us when we did new session. Rename window does just what you think. Select window is a way to pick between them. Swap window lets you switch the order of a pair of windows in your current session. Move window lets you move a window between 2 sessions. Link window lets you take a window that's in one session and add it to another session so that it's now in multiple sessions. Kill window does just what you think it does. Find window lets you type a string and it will identify the window by its name or by its contents. List windows we're going to show in a second, and choose window we're going to show in a second. And there's plenty more. So as always, man TMUX. So some details about windows. A window may be linked into more than one session at a time. In fact, that's how session groups that we just talked about work. You can move one from one to another. You do that with move window. A window always contains at least one pane. If that pane goes away, the window goes away. And if you have a window with multiple panes in it, you can cycle through some preset layouts. The shortcut for that is prefix space. And you can, once you have a layout that's exactly the way you want, list windows will give you a special encoded form of that layout that you can restore anytime you want. So I'm going to do a demo here by special request from Jim McQuillan on how to move a window from one session to another. So let us go to this, and I'm going to split this vertically. All right, now here's a thing that I just did. I used the built-in command of iterm2 to split my window into two separate terminals. I did not use TMUX to do this because I want to use two different sessions at the same time, and a single client can only show one session at a time. So here I'm going to make a new session named destination. And I'm going to say vim hello world.text. So now I'm in Vim, and I want to grab the man page from this mug session that you see on the left here and add it to this destination session that you see on the right here. So I'm going to bring up the command line, and I'm going to say move window -s for source, so from mug : the man page, and I'm going to put it in right here in this one. Now I could say -t for target, but if I just say nothing, it's just going to do it by itself. It's just going to pick the active session as the one where it goes. So now man is gone. We're down to just Vim there. And over here, we have the man page from the other session. So that is how you move a window between two sessions. All right. I'm going too fast. We have too much time left. Yeah, we look at that.
Oh, I'm sure there's going to be questions at the very end.
I hope so. I have promised at the end to use TMUX to show people how to do the things that they want to know how to do. So let's dig into panes for a little bit. Every pane, of course, has a unique server-wide unchanging pane ID. For panes, they're prefixed by a %. So $ for session, @ for window, % for panes. Every pane has an index within its window. That index changes as you reorder the panes. The lowest numbered index is at the top left, and the highest index is at the bottom right. So if you rotate them around, that's still going to be true. Even if the pane is in a different place, it's going to be a different index to match this layout. Pane indices start at 0 unless you specifically set the pane base index, which I always do. I always turn it to 1, as I think a lot of people do. Several commands take a -t target pane. There's a special token for that, or you can use an index or a pane ID. And if you are targeting a pane, you can start it with the session and or window if you need to, and separate it from the window with a period. So if you look here, my first example, my session : @2.%2, that says the session is my session, it's window number 2, window ID 2, dot pane ID 2. Or my second example is session ID 6, the window named editor, dot the last window. Exclamation point means the last window. And finally, : dot plus, means the current session I should probably switch to the next slide so you can see. The token meaning the last pane can be used with exclamation point instead. And the token meaning the next pane plus. So we said colon dot plus. That means the current session, colon, the current window, dot, and then plus means the next pane. If I'd said +2 instead of plus, that would mean 2 panes from where I am now. Same with minus. And there's a bunch of different pane identifiers there that you can use. So here I would go back to slide 35 so I could show you the next pane command. In fact, let's do that. Slide 35. You can see here that I use select pane minus T for target, and select pane takes a pane for its target, colon dot plus, exactly like we just discussed. And this was there. So let's take a look at some pane-specific commands. Split window, which should be called split pane and has an alias for that. Join pane, list panes, capture pane. That's a thing that lets you collect the entire contents of a pane into a paste buffer. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Pipe pane lets you send the contents of a pane into a command or file. Swap pane lets you switch to within a window or even between 2 windows, because you can target different sessions, different windows, different whatever. And resize pane, you're actually going to do resize pane all the time, because when you are looking at a particular pane like this one here, if you say the prefix followed by Z, that pane zooms to fill the entire session window. And then Z again makes it go back down. So zoom happens a lot. Some details about panes. Normally a pane is just a terminal. You type into it, things happen. You're running some app in it like Top or Vim or Man or any of the things that we've done so far. Sometimes, though, it's going to be in a special mode. And there's a set of modes, copy mode, buffer mode. We're going to talk about those a little ways down the way. View mode, client mode. We were in view mode a second ago when we did the list keys to see what capital C was bound to. That was actually view mode. Client mode lets us pick a client. Tree mode is something for all the chooses, and option mode is what that customized thing did for us, the prefix capital C. You can see the pane indices with prefix Q. So if I were looking here in this, let me actually I don't know what I just did, but it was the right thing. Control A, Q, numbers my panes, shows me what's what. We already talked about zooming a pane, and panes can be moved from one window to another, even creating a new window in the process. Break pane will do that. We're not going to demo that, but it's not unlike how we move a window from one session to another. But here's something interesting to talk about, the status line. The status line we've looked at over and over again. Like here, the status line is showing several things. It's showing my session name in square brackets, and then one tab for each window. The active one is marked in a special color. And then over here, it's showing my host. I'm on my local Mac, which is named Feynman. So that's what it's showing as the host name. So let's talk about the status line and how you build it up yourself. Status line is built out of 3 different parts. Everything on the left, the window list in the middle, and then everything on the right. You control what goes into the stuff on the left or the stuff on the right with the options status left and status right. You set those with set option. You can set them with set option -G if you want to control it for everything. And I think you can control them individually per window. I'm not totally sure about that. You can actually run code inside the status bar. The status bar gets updated regularly. I think the normal interval is 15 seconds or 5 seconds or something like that, or maybe 1 second. And you can run code by putting it in pound parens. So for instance, you could list the uptime in your status line. So why don't we actually do that right now? So I will Control A, Shift : customize mode, and then we will search for status right, and then we will add to status right space. What were we going to add here? What were we going to add here?
Uptime.
Uptime, that's right. Pound uptime. So now you can see, and I'll get out of status mode. Now you can see I've got the uptime listed, which is kind of useful and neat. There's a couple options to control the maximum length of the left and right side, what the refresh interval is, whether the status line is at the top or bottom, a bunch of things like that. You probably saw that I had pound and curly braces in my status line. And pound with curly braces are what we call format variables. They are TMUX's templating language. It's not a very big templating language, and it's kind of, I don't know, it doesn't fill me with satisfaction, but it's reasonable. A lot of commands take format with the format flag -F, and they're always surrounded by double quotes, as far as I know. If you don't put double quotes, bad stuff happens. I don't know if single quotes work. I didn't try that. I didn't test it. And they're built from format variables and options surrounded by the pound curlies. So for instance, here's how you would call list windows with a format. First, let me copy this. And let's first do just a plain list windows. So that lists things, shows the layout like I promised you would be there. There's the window ID @2 and @0, the window number, and the window name, and how many panes are in it. But we want to see if I can paste. We want to. We don't want to say TMUX there. we want to show just the window ID and the window name, just those two things. And there we have it. @2 is the window ID for the Vim window. That's this one here. Even though it's window number 1, it's ID number 2. And the man page is ID 0, because it was the very first window we made in that other session and then moved it over. It kept its ID because it's under the same server. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so there's conditional configuration. Here's 3 different ways to make stuff happen in your config file depending on existing values or code that you run. So first, there's the ternary operator, and that is when you say pound curlies with a question mark and a variable inside. I'm going to show you all these things in my config file in just a second. If the variable is truthy, it produces the first string, otherwise it produces the second string. So this would produce either yes or no if automatic rename was turned on. Automatic rename is either 0 or 1. You can also do conditionals. So here's an example from my config. %if is the thing that starts a conditional, or %else if. And it's a format string, so it has 0 quotes around it. Pound curly, and then the operator that we're using, which here is equal for comparison, the colon, as I said before. And then string 1 is the value of host, and string 2 is the value of Ubuntu. So this is comparing if the host I'm on is Ubuntu, and if so, do something. And then finally, you can use the if shell command. So here's me testing to see, oh, I said name instead of uname. That's really uname. I'm testing to see if I'm on my Mac, because uname is Darwin. So let's actually take a look at my configuration.
Wolf, I think it's important to point out that you use the same TMUX config on all your machines.
I do, and that's why I have conditional stuff in there.
Yeah, so it behaves differently depending on the machine you're on, but it's the same config file everywhere.
Yes. So if I'm on my Ubuntu machine, then my status style is a white foreground on a blue background. If I'm on any other system, like here on Feynman, then my status style is a white foreground, like destination and Vim and man there, on a green background. That's the green right there. And if I'm on my Mac, then I do this special copy thing when I say Y, which I'm going to talk about when I get to copy mode. But mainly, oh, and here's me setting the base index and the pane base index. And also fixing up split window -H and -V to have better key commands. I should have talked about that, but I did not think to stick that in the right place. Sorry about that. All right. Some modes. TMUX has several modes, and we talked about this when we talked about panes. Yeah.
Sorry, it's Scott here. Quick question: when you are setting things within TMUX, and you're setting with -G for global, does that automatically write the .tmux.conf, or is there a command that does that, or?
It does not. You have to edit your tmux conf by hand.
Okay.
And if you want to set it using your tmux conf, instead of setting it live at the command line or in the customize mode command, then you have to resource, source-file your tmux.conf file.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Oops, I went backwards. All right, so what is a tmux mode? Like I said previously, normally in tmux, the keystrokes all go into the thing that's running in the active pane, whether it's a shell, an editor, a utility, whatever. One key at a time, you can make it go to tmux itself by hitting the prefix. So prefix X sends X to tmux instead of into the app. However, tmux goes into various modes, and when it's in one of these modes, your keystrokes are all going into tmux, and they control tmux. They don't go to what's in the pane, and usually what's in the pane is they don't go to the thing that you were running in the pane a second ago. The thing that you were running in the pane a second ago is still there behind whatever you're looking at now, but your keys are not going to that. They're going to usually the thing that you're looking at. And so there's a couple different pane modes, copy mode, buffer mode. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. But view mode, client mode, tree mode, and option mode are the ones we're going to talk about first. We've already seen options mode. That was what we got when we were setting options, turning them on and off, and looking at exploring with them. Tree mode we've seen because we did choose session or choose window. View mode we saw when we looked at list keys. I haven't shown you client mode yet, but let's have a live demo here. All right, so here we are in the man page, and I'm going to do a list keys, and now I'm using Vim key bindings to navigate around here. G goes to the top, Shift G goes to the bottom, K goes up, J goes down. I don't know if you can control the keys for specific modes that aren't copy mode. Because when you look at man tmux, which I'm going to hit Q to get back to, and I look at view mode, which is what we were just in. Actually, let me do something real quick. I've got my load average down here, my uptime or whatever that is. I'm going to actually make that go away by reloading my tmux config file. Oh, it didn't go away. That's annoying. Okay, all right, we'll live. I had a widget that showed what mode I was in that I had added, and if we look at my status right, I use the tertiary operator that if my pane is in a mode, then I want to, in square brackets, show the mode. Otherwise, I want nothing. So it just said Feynman and nothing when I was not in a mode. And then when I was in copy mode or view mode, it showed that in square brackets at the very end. And
it looks, you've got a pen, you got -GA.
yeah, that's right, because I set status right here
Okay.
to be my host name.
Okay.
And then GA means global, but append to the existing one this string right here.
It's odd that that didn't work.
Yeah, actually, let's just set option -G status right pound question mark. Yeah, my keyboard layout is getting to me. Aim in mode, comma, square bracket, pound, curly, aim mode, curly, square bracket, comma, curly, double quote. I don't know why that didn't work. I must not be understanding something. Or maybe because I set this in customized mode, maybe that takes precedence over.
Maybe.
Yeah, that could be right. So what were we going to look at? We use list keys to be in view mode. We're going to use choose tree to show choose mode, tree mode, whatever it's called. You can see that this is showing, that's a session, which I can collapse. So I've got two sessions showing, and you can see it shows the two windows in this session. Window 1 is called TMUX, window 2 is called man. You can see the tab bar at the bottom shows TMUX and man. This mug session has one window in it, which has two panes in it. And there you can see the two panes. One's a Vim pane, and one is a Bash pane. And if you could only see, this would say that it was in tree mode or choose mode. And Q gets us out. And we've already seen customize mode. All right, here's the big deal. Copy and paste. So unlike the other modes, the copy mode key bindings are something you control. You don't set them individually like you do with the normal keys, like we did with capital C and the prefix and all those things by doing bind key. You set them all at once by setting the mode keys option. So if I
Some right-wing groups think so. Sandra O'Connor is trying to keep their opinion from endangering her confirmation.
Come on, please.
Somebody's watching the news.
Feelings on the rights of women and how that.
If we look here, we see that I set my mode keys to be VI. So when I'm in copy mode, let's go into copy mode. We're on the man page. Copy mode you get into with left square bracket. Now, if you look in the upper right-hand corner here, you see 0/0. That little widget there is your notification that you're in copy mode. And since I've set VI keys, I can do things like use Control B or Control F. I've only got one page here, so I don't have anything to go back in. I can use K. If I hit space, I'll start selecting. Now I'm hitting H. And I just want to copy this part, so I will hit Enter. That's what does it in VI mode. And now I'm out of copy mode. You can see that that thing went away. And I can make a new window. And I can paste what I had. Actually, let me just show you what I've got so far. Because I can go into buffer mode. choose buffer. There's the hunk of text that I copied, and you can see that my buffer is labeled 0 because copying actually copies a stack of buffers. You can copy as many things as you want. So I'm going to paste 0. And of course, that's not really a command, so it doesn't work. Where were we? So this is the stuff I just showed you. You get into copy mode with prefix left square bracket. You know you're in copy mode because of the number widget in the upper right-hand corner. You maneuver around with either the Vim key bindings or the Emacs key bindings, depending on what you've chosen. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you know, because you've got your mouse turned on, or you use Control F in VI mode, or whatever, that generally takes you out of copy mode unless you've changed it to do something different. I was in VI mode, so I used space to start selecting. In Emacs, you use Control Space. Then Enter in VI mode copies the selected text. Alt-W in Emacs mode copies the selected text. Then you go wherever you want to paste it, and you paste it by hitting prefix square bracket. And then buffer mode, every time you copy, adds another buffer to the stack, and executing the command choose buffer, or use prefix equal, puts you into buffer mode where you can select any of the ones that you've copied and paste it right where you are. So scripting. I have good news and bad news about scripting. The good news is that scripting is easy, and it's all from the shell that you already know and love, because you can use any tmux command from the shell, and most of them take targets -t, so you can target the exact session, window, and pane that you need to manipulate. You can use all the conditionals that are in your shell. Everything you know and love controls it. The bad news is I have no examples because it's so easy. But I think there's a better way than scripting it, and that is to use tmuxinator. Tmuxinator is a wrapper for tmux to build complicated setups. It will make the windows, it will split the panes, it will start up all the programs to build your development environment. It's a Ruby gem. You can install it with your package manager like I did. I did brew install tmuxinator, and I did apt install tmuxinator on my Ubuntu system. And scripting is imperative. You tell it what to do. Tmuxinator is declarative. You tell it what you want. And you tell it what you want in a YAML file. So let's actually build a let me detach from this, and I'm going to say tmuxinator ls. These are the different tmuxinator projects that I have defined so far. I can actually shorten tmuxinator to mux because I have an alias, and I'm going to start my mug Angular environment. And yes, I know tmuxinator and tmux are not perfectly aligned because my tmux is 3.3 next. So what I have here is two windows. One's called client and one's called server. In my client window, I've got three panes. One is a VI pane that is looking at my client source, which is a JavaScript style JavaScript style TypeScript client-side program, and it's running the Angular Live Development Server, which I can't show you because I don't have my web browser turned on to do the right thing. But also, I have a server set up, which is looking at Python. Which is the client, is the server side of this. A little, I've forgotten what I'm using for this. I think I'm using Fast API, and it is running its server right here. So here's a window for me, a pane for me to do Git commands in, for instance, a pane that's running the server. And if I go back to the client, here is my editor, a window for me to do, a pane for me to do Git commands in, and a pane that's running the client. If I detach from all of this and start Angular again, it just immediately hooks up to the existing one. But if I kill it, tmux ls, so mug Angular, I'm going to tmux kill session minus target mug Angular. Now tmux ls, it's gone. And now if I do start Angular again, then it restarts the windows, restarts the panes, starts all the programs that go inside them, just like I wanted. I'm going to detach from that, and I'm going to say mux help. There's a couple of things that are interesting here, like mux debug is going to show you how it actually does its job. So mux debug mug Angular. Oh, look at that. It knows the difference. Let me kill session again. What I'm saying here is this is a really short expression of what's happening. It's saying that because it knows the session is already running. If I kill session mug Angular and then debug mux Angular again, now it gives me the long version of what it's doing, where it's going to make a new session named mug Angular with the client window. It's going to change directories. It's going to make a new window that's called server. It's going to send in keys to start up the stuff that I told it to start up. It's going to split the windows, all of this stuff. I did not know that it would know the difference when you do debug between the session running and not running. That is fascinating to me. You can copy an existing project to a new project. In fact, that's what I did because I have this Angular project right here, but it was designed for a much smaller font. And Mug Angular was designed for a much bigger font so that the screen would fit less. That's why I needed a special one. I put different layouts in them. And let's actually look at so this is how I defined it. The name of the project is Mug Angular. This is where it lives in .config tmuxinator mugangular.yaml. This is the directory where everything lives. It lives inside Final Project. I have a command on my system called activate found VM. That's a function that I wrote that I also export that looks for Python virtual environments in the directory to which you are CDing. And if it finds one, it automatically activates it. I have windows, a client window and a server window. The client window lives in client OShop. That's the directory where it lives. And the server lives in server. Remember how we used list windows and we got the code out of it to say what the layout was? This is the layout from list windows, which I put in to reestablish exactly the layout that I had before, same as in the second one. And then I had 3 panes. The first pane is Vim, the second pane is just bash, and the third pane is ngserve. That's what does the Angular serve function. And in the server window, it's Vim, a bash window, and then uviacorn. Uviacorn is a server that is watching Python files. So start and stop, version. Don't call implode, that destroys everything. Help we've just used. Doctor examines a particular configuration. Delete deletes individual projects. And that's about all we want to look at there. I see why it looks like we have so much time left. It starts over again. I have a clock that is running in my Keynote presenters page. It's showing me the current slide, the next slide, and the presenter notes. And that clock starts over at 1 hour and 15 minutes every time I restart the app. So that's annoying. I actually don't know how much time we've spent so far. How much time have we spent so far?
We're about 1:25 minutes, I think, 1:30.
An hour and 30?
Hour and 30, yeah.
All right. Well, let's you and me do some pair programming, Jim. Now, I've described here the optimal way to do this, but Jim and I are not going to do this the optimal way because we already had a session set up and we're ready to go. This session is on my shared Ubuntu server. So I am going to SSH into my server, and I'm going to
We'll do a TMUX LS to show your existing.
yeah, but I got to remember the socket.
Yeah. Oh, it's
2419. So there it is, Wolf Jam, and it's already attached. Do I have that? I don't. You're attached to it.
I was. I just did detached.
Oh, let's
go ahead and list. Go ahead and list it again.
Yeah, it was you. So TMUX minus capital S for socket /var /TMUX /pairing attach session to Got to target the session. So -T wolf jam. All right.
Yep.
So now we are sharing a session. You can't see his screen. But
I'm
I'm
not
up
in it
here.
yet.
You're not in yet?
No, but I type exactly the same command, and I'll attach to it. So now
And
I'm
your
in.
window is smaller than mine, so it shrunk
yeah.
my client.
Yeah, which is a good point because here I just stretched my window.
All
I'm
right,
on my laptop.
now you do some typing.
Oh, wait. Hello there.
So we're both typing into the same session. There's only one insertion point. So if we were to both type at the same time, it would be a jumbled mess. But we can trade off, and if we were on the phone, we could be talking at the same time that we're pair programming. So one person could be steering while the other person types, just like pair programming is supposed to be. So that's pairing. It's simple. The technique that I show in the slides does the same thing.
Will that work with more than 2 people?
Yes. You can attach as many clients as you want to a session. And the technique that I describe in the slides, where you use a session group instead of a single session, and each person is attached to a different session in that same session group. All the sessions in the session group have the same windows in them. So you can each have a different active window. So Jim could be vimming in a different window than I am. If I make a new window here and we switch to it, Jim switched to it too.
Yeah.
Jim sees the same thing that I see. But if we were in a session group, then this would not necessarily be the same window that Jim was looking at. If we were looking at the same window, we'd have the same active pane. And for instance, if it was Vim, there would still only be one insertion point we'd be sharing. But there's the possibility of us running 2 different Vims and both editing at the same time.
And so what about running a test window then? So you write your programming in one Vim session and then you run it. Can you both be seeing that run session, that run window?
Yes, absolutely. If I were running that Angular session that I showed with tmuxinator, if I were running that on the server instead of on my local, and it were set up in this way where Jim had permissions, Jim would see exactly the same thing. He'd see the same servers running. He'd see the output from the servers. It would all be, we would all see everything. Does that answer your question? So definitely get the slide deck.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry, I was muted again. Yes, I did answer the question. Thank you.
No worries. So definitely download the slide deck so you can do the thing the slides say instead of the things that Jim and I just said. So here's what we covered. What TMUX is good for, the architecture of TMUX, some configuration stuff, the most important commands, the big pieces, playing with the status line, a little bit about automation, modes, and we did pair programming. There's a lot of stuff I didn't talk about. I didn't talk about plugins or automatic window renaming. I didn't talk about linking one window to multiple sessions, even though we sort of showed it with session groups. I didn't talk about hooks. That's another programming concept. You can make things happen at specified events during TMUX. I only briefly touched on formats. There's a lot more to it. You know, you can format dates and times. You can pull out just the base directory, base name, or the directory of a file path. Lots of other stuff that happens in formats. I didn't talk about styles, except that I showed some in my config file where I set foreground equals white, background equals green. That's a style. styles have a thing that's sort of like formats that let you control them. There's pop-ups and pop-up menus, like that autocomplete pop-up that showed up. You can actually program those yourself. There's control mode. If you're using iTerm 2, control mode lets iTerm manage TMUX stuff natively. I don't know what other GUI terminals control mode works with, but it's worth investigating. TMUX goes through a certain sequence of parsing and execution for its commands that are worth knowing about. And I mentioned key tables and that I wasn't going to talk about them. But key tables, for instance, give you the power to define a separate special prefix just for, say, your split commands. Or to define multi-key long sequences that do something. Key tables are very powerful, and we didn't do anything with them. But they're part of bind key. You'll see them. Remember, man TMUX. And these are the places to go. The TMUX repo, man TMUX, of course. There's a wiki. There's 2 books that I highly recommend. Productive Mouse Free Development. It's written in 2016, but the 2018 update is pretty up to date. The Tao of TMUX and Terminal Tricks is a good book. There's a blog on how to install Git Bash on Windows, TMUX for Git Bash on Windows. My tmux.conf file is up. Wait, I better push that. I'm going to have to push what I have right now. And then there's that split window guide that I talked about. Finally, let me tell you what I used to do this presentation. I'm on a Mac connecting to an Ubuntu server. I didn't actually use KeyCaster to show the keys that I was hitting because I forgot, and I should have. I'm sorry. I'm using TMUX version Next 3.3 and tmuxinator 3.0.1, even though tmuxinator refuses to recognize that version of TMUX. I installed them both with Homebrew. I'm running 20.04.3 20.04.3 of Ubuntu and TMUX 3.0a installed by apt. I'm using my existing TMUX config instead of starting from nothing. I'm using Keynote to give the presentation, but the slides with presenter notes will be available as a PDF. The font I'm using in the terminal is JetBrains Mono, in case you like that. And these slides, because I want to make a PDF of them, use Andale Mono because JetBrains Mono isn't available to everybody. And for the paired programming demo, Jim connected to the Ubuntu server from Canada through his MacBook Air. So let me go back a slide to books and links, or to what we covered, and let me ask you this: what would you like me to show you? Wow, this took a long time.
Hey, Wolf.
Yeah.
Let me just talk for a second about how useful this has been to me this week.
Okay.
I'm like 50 miles north of Winnipeg with my friend Scott this week, and I've got my little Apple MacBook Air, and I'm still trying to get work done. So I'm SSHing to a data center down in Southfield, Michigan, and first of all, my connectivity is not great up here. I'm using my cell phone. I've got an international data plan, so I can get data up here, but it's not terribly reliable. So my MacBook is routing through my cell phone to the data center down in Southfield. I'm using OpenVPN to keep everything good and secure. So once I SSH into that server in Southfield, then I run TMUX. And within TMUX, I open up a bunch of windows. And I can switch between the windows. I've remapped my prefix key to be Control-A because I used to use screen. So I can just do Control-A1, Control-A2, Control-A3 to cycle through my windows. And I use Vim. I open up a bunch of source files in Vim, and I'm playing all day long. But because my connectivity is not great, sometimes I'll lose the connection. And when that happens, then my OpenVPN session fails, SSH fails. Fortunately, TMUX recognizes that as a disconnect, and it detaches all my sessions. So a few minutes later, when I realize I'm no longer connected, I'll bring up the connection again, SSH back to the server, run tmux attach, and there I am, exactly where I left off. I haven't lost anything. I don't have to kill off stale Vim sessions or delete those Vim files, the Vim swap files or anything like that. I just reattach and I'm ready to go. It's very, very useful. It's coming great. It's been very handy this week.
And how would you say it compares to Screen?
Well, all I ever did before with Screen was just detach. And that was great. I never used, I don't even know if it does multiple windows. Maybe it does, but I never did that. But now I'm doing windows. Today I started using panes. So in one window, I've got 3 panes open so I can compile a program and I can I can run a program. I can watch the log file all in the same screen. It's very, very handy.
I did not show. Let me I've got 3 panes here. And if I use Control A space.
Oh, you're cycling through the layouts.
Yes.
Yes.
And when I find what I like, I can adjust it to be just the way I want it. Like I like this one, but I want the hello pane to be smaller. Then I can see exactly this is the layout that I would use, just like that. There's actually a sed command to grab just what you want. But I would use that layout in my tmuxinator file to get it to be exactly this way again.
Wolf, could you change the background colors or make them in some way distinguishable in case you want to do several different things like this?
Like you want the main pane, the active pane to be bright and the other panes to be dim?
Well, just so you can see, the difference between. So you were shuffling through them pretty quick, and so there were some that looked very similar to me. If you had like different colors to them, it's like the 1, 2, 3. If there was something that told me number 2 has a blue background instead of a green background or something like that. That way, when you shuffle through and you make changes, you're trying out different panes and different formats, you'd be able to tell which one's which.
I don't know if you can do that. I know you can change colors based on whether it's the active pane or not. I don't know if you can change colors based on whether it's a specific pane or not.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering if there's some way you can tell the difference. I mean, you have like tmux.config in the upper left of the one on the left. And I don't see any like labeling of those other panes there.
On the bottom, there's the labeling of the current menus. There's another fun little trick too. If you hit Control B and then W, it shows all the various windows and whatnot. So you can also swap over to whichever window you want to go to. I find myself using that a lot, and it gives you a live preview as well.
What did you hit to get that?
Control B and then W.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those things that I accidentally ran into because I am in Vim, and anything that isn't preceded by Control B is fair game, and vice versa.
Look, I got my thing back. See down here in the lower right-hand corner? It says tree mode. And if I hit the square bracket, now I'm in copy mode. And if I do TMUX choose client, I'm in client mode. I love this little widget I made. It's easy.
I actually have a script called dev and IRC.
Mhm.
IRC brings up my IRC client, so it automatically attaches to a session called IRC. And then dev, I can put a name after it, and that'll automatically attach to whatever I'm looking for. Those are real handy. I can post those if folks want that.
That sounds super useful. Any other questions? I hope I made an impression. I hope you guys find some utility in this.
This has been excellent. Thank you, Wolf.
I'm so glad and excited to present on a topic for which I have a great deal of excitement and love. I really like TMUX, and it was really good to be able to talk about it.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Wolf. And I know how hard you worked on this. This is fantastic.
All right, folks. If you would please fill out your survey